I just saw the cutest bunny in our backyard. I will insert a photo right now because this little cutie has been hopping around our backyard all week and it is just so sweet and I love it so much. Hi everyone, Rosie here. Welcome back to my channel. It's time for my May wrap-up. I actually read some books in May, so let's chat about them. First one I read was Vox Machina Origins, and I do not have the authors written down here, but they'll be in the description. This is a collection of Critical Role comics. So Critical Role is an online show where people play Dungeons & Dragons. It's really good. I spent most of my reading slump watching that. So it's really fitting that this is my first book when I came back. This is Series 1 and Series 2 collected into a library collector's edition thing, and it was so great. I didn't know that much about the campaign 1 of Critical Role before I started watching, and this series of comics introduces like the backstory of all the characters and like how they met and how they came to the point where the live stream starts. So it was really fun to watch this while also, it was really fun to read this while also watching the shows, because I'd come across things in episodes and be like, oh, I know what they're referencing there because I read the comics. It was really fun. Definitely very niche. Like, I don't know if this would be a fun comic if you're not already interested in Critical Role, but I loved it. I then finished The Fifth Elephant by Terry Pratchett. This was the book that actually started pulling me out of my slump. I didn't finish it as fast. This is a City Watch novel about Sam Vimes on the Discworld, and in this one he has to travel to Uberwald to be a diplomat for Ankh-Morpork, and shenanigans ensue. It was delightful, and I don't really have a review because I wasn't thinking, I was just enjoying. In fact, I enjoyed so much that my next read was The Truth, also by Terry Pratchett. This is the Discworld novel that comes immediately after The Fifth Elephant. I was getting a bit caught up in my reread, and as the title might suggest, The Truth involves newspapers and movable type press arriving in Ankh-Morpork, and of course, because it's Ankh-Morpork, there's a plot against the patrician. This was an absolute masterpiece of a book. It was written, I think, in the late 90s? Mid-90s? I'm actually not sure when this one was published. Probably late 90s, if not early 2000s. But so much of what Pratchett is looking at and talking about is so relevant today. It is always astounding how evergreen and just like continuously valuable his writing is. This was also really fun to read like back to back with a City Watch novel, because The Truth feels like a City Watch novel from a different perspective. This feels like he could have told this story from the perspective of the City Watch and it still would have been a great novel. But instead, we're seeing it from the perspective of these entrepreneurial journalists who are just trying to make a go of things. It lends a really interesting twist. It's really cool, as always in Discworld, to see the characters that we know and love pop up, but not be from their perspective. I loved it. It was just fantastic. And also, if the topic just sounds really interesting to you, this is a standalone novel, so you could totally jump in and just read this. You don't need to have read other Discworld novels. It's just, I think there's certain things that you'll appreciate a lot having read other ones. And not to spoil a run, I then listened to the audiobook of Sourcery, also by Terry Pratchett. This is, I think, book 5 in the Discworld series, and it is the introduction we chose for the Wizards for Katja's Discworld read-along, where we're reading sort of the introductory book to each series. In this one, a sorcerer is born, magic is flooding back to the disc, and we're all being very clearly reminded why the Wizards formed a university and spend all of their time eating and literally stabbing each other in the back instead of going to war with magic. It was really wonderful. I was really sad to miss the live show discussion, and I haven't actually had a chance to go back and watch that yet, but I'm sure it's amazing, so I'll link it up here or in the description or something. And I can't wait for whatever book we're reading in July. I actually can't remember. I think it might be Guards, but I'm not positive. Either way, it's super fun. You should join us. At this point in the month, I had been working on my May of the Moderns read for several weeks, and it was Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day by Winifred Watson. I did a whole separate video review about this because it was so interesting and I had so many thoughts about it. The essential premise is that it is about a governess in London who's in her middle age and she's not doing super well. And one day, this is set in 1938, by the way, she gets sent to the wrong address and has this one day of sort of being swept up into the circle of a glamorous nightclub singer. It was phenomenal. Definitely go watch that review because I had so many thoughts about this book and I want to discuss all of them with you. Then I finished a book I had been reading for even longer, Under Fortunate Stars by Hutchings, which I actually started before my reading slump? When did I start this book? It had been a long time, but I got back into it and I finished it. I liked it a lot. It is a time travel space opera about a truly heroic group of people in the middle of a massive war between humanity, which is now spread throughout all of space, and I think the first alien nation that they make contact with. It is so cool. It had, according to my notes, because I actually wrote these down when I was thinking about it, so I'm going to refer to them a lot here, very Star Wars storytelling vibes, but a much more nuanced and interesting feeling Firefly setting vibes, possibly taking the interesting nuance and perspectives of Firefly even a step further, with an absolutely fascinating cast of characters. So this is 100% a story about the implications of time travel. But in a very different way to a lot of other stories, I found that theme could have definitely been stronger, especially since it's not a twisty-turny implications of time travel, like in The Psychology of Time Travel, which I loved in February. Check out that review up here. This is quite linear, and I felt from the beginning it was quite clear what was going to happen. It was more of a, how is this going to come about? And there were still things that in the last few chapters I was like, oh, I did not see that coming. I probably should have if I'd been reading more closely, but anyway, it was really interesting. I liked it a lot, but I think maybe this wasn't the right time for me. There was just a lot to keep track of and a lot to get invested in. There's a lot of different characters that we are seeing at many different points in time. I think it's the sort of book that if you wanted to get completely absorbed in a book and just spend all day reading something, this might be a really good book, but where I was sort of picking it up, putting it down, not really feeling like I wanted to put the work in, I think I just didn't get as invested and as immersed as I would have liked to be with this book. But it was really good, and I still think it's a really great book, and I highly recommend checking it out. It actually just came out at the beginning of May, and it was an e-arc, so thank you to NetGalley, and I think it's from Tor. I don't know, make sure you go check this out if you like sci-fi and time travel and interesting space societies. My last book of the month was Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi. I adored Homegoing. I think I read it in 2021? Or 2020. I actually don't remember when I read it, but whenever that was, I really, really loved it. It was so good, and therefore it took me absolutely forever to start Transcendent Kingdom. I knew I was going to love it. I knew it was going to be amazing, and for some reason that makes me not want to read things. Emma of the Overstuffed Shelf talked in a recent video about how sometimes being really hyped up for a book can make her avoid it because the pressure and like the expectations on it can just feel so heavy, and this was 100% the case here. But I did want to read it, so I posted a poll on my community tab a little while back asking you guys, what should I read first, this or Life Ceremony by Sayaka Murata? And the people spoke. They said Transcendent Kingdom. I initially had a little bit of trouble starting. It actually took me a couple days to like actually pick it up, but once I did, this book was phenomenal. It was super bingeable. The writing style just like kept me sucked in and kept me reading more chapters. I think I read this in 4 sittings. Every time I sat down, I'd read like a quarter or a third of the book because I was so into it. It's a novel about a young woman who's doing a PhD on the neuroscience of addiction, and she's also grappling with sort of her family's history and her family's demons. There's really strong themes of family, religion, addiction, science, immigration, being a person. It's really, really cool. It's a novel that 100% feels like a memoir. This feels like you could be reading some person's memoir of their family's story and their experience and how that has shaped them, which is something I love in novels. I can't put my finger on what exactly it is. I don't know why, but I just vibe so much with a novel that feels, yeah, like I could be reading a memoir. I don't know why. It's just really, really cool. My final two notes are that in Homegoing, Gyasi really showed her ability to quickly and concisely communicate a character. Homegoing, for those of you who haven't read it, is a book told in a series of chapters that follows an entire family's history, and each chapter is a different person's story. So we only spend one chapter with each character, really. They might pop up in other ones, but we only have one chapter in their head. And yet, you feel like you know and understand each of these characters, even though we only spend a chapter with them. In Transcendent Kingdom, I think she's really showing that she can go deep as well. She can spend an entire book exploring a character, and it feels even more real. And you feel like you're seeing this character even more clearly, not just repetitively. So that was phenomenal. If you liked Homegoing, definitely read this. I know some people don't like it as much, but I thought it was different and equally as fantastic. And finally, I love that the science in the novel is apparently actually based on a paper that a friend of Gyasi's wrote. I just think that is so cool. I loved how much the science was a part of this and how much that build what was going on in the character's life, because I think that really is how it would be to do a PhD. Given that this character is a PhD student, is at a critical point in her work, that her work is so closely tied to herself and her family and what her family has been through, I loved that that side of the novel was actually based on something real. I'm not saying all authors who want to write about science or include scientist characters need to like actually base it on reality. I'm all for science fiction, and I'm also all for that's not what I'm doing in this book. That's valid. But for me, in this book, in this context, the fact that it did have that basis in reality just made it all the cooler. Alright, this has been a pretty quick video because I didn't read that many books in May. Definitely still working my way out of the slump and just getting back into reading and stuff. But I liked them a lot, so that's okay, right? Better to read a few books that I really loved than lots of books that didn't make me happy. Let me know down below, what did you read in May? What was your favorite book, your least favorite book, just a book you want to chat about? And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like down below. If you would like to see more of my videos, make sure you hit subscribe, and thank you for watching.